Okay, so I always like to start with a story. And this was a phone call I got probably about a year and a half ago. And this was a guy who was selling on Amazon and doing pretty well. And he wrote and said, "Hey, so I just got this contract from someone that I'm trying to set up a licensing deal with. I have this great product that's been selling really well, and I've been trying to see what kind of licensing approach I can do and try to grow my brand on Amazon. And part of the contract says that I'm responsible for compliance. And I have no idea what it means, and your company does compliance, so can you help me out here?" And I was like, okay, I'll take a look at this. And so I look at his brand and his product, and note that more than half of the products were for children, which any one of you who have ever done children's products may realize children's products are regulated and are important to make sure are safe. And he had no idea what compliance was, so that was charming. And then looked and saw that he had no idea about anything with his supplier. He had been using Alibaba, and there was a social responsibility clause in the licensing contract. And so we went through the whole thing, explained to him what his risks were if he signed the licensing agreement, and they went and actually looked at his factory, went through this whole rigmarole with him, and ended up having to resource for the product, which took him about 6 months. Had to perform testing on the product, had to make a few changes to internal components, and after about 6 months, he was able to sign the licensing contract. So if he had just signed it and then found out about it, this particular licensor was, I would say they're kind of medium range in terms of their enforcement policies. But if, say, he'd ever signed something with like Disney or someone like that, what they do basically, if you don't meet their licensing requirements, is they tell you, you have 30 days to shut down. So it doesn't matter what you paid them, it doesn't matter how much inventory you have on hand, you are no longer allowed to sell it, you are no longer allowed to work for them. So it can be pretty tough if you're coming from this whole Amazon seller thing and learning how to manage your Amazon seller business, and then let's expand it, let's try something new in traditional business, and then realize that you have no idea how to do it. So that's what we're going to talk about today is, first of all, how to work backwards on Amazon to where you can actually kind of suspension proof your business in a way. I mean, it's Amazon, so you can't really suspension proof it, but you can get pretty close. And then all of the things that go into this help you to be able to successfully take the business off of Amazon. Okay. So working backwards is a term that's used at Amazon. And in true working backwards fashion, when presenting ideas for new products, Amazon employees are required to write a press release for the product launch. They're encouraged to think big, that's a leadership principle, and leap into the future, as big as possible, sometimes in really crazy ways. Why would the press want to write about this product? And you're trying to imagine that. What would they say? Because their core value is putting the customer first, the press release must focus on the customer need and include a customer quote. How are they reacting to this product? How has it changed their lives? So this is how Amazon launches all new projects, all new product launches, new software solutions. The idea is to basically think ahead to what the customer wants and then work backwards to come up with a product that works for that customer. Of course, at Amazon, mostly it's software, but in the private label teams, of course, it's products, physical products. So let's work backwards in the same way from something very negative, so not a positive press release about your awesome launch, but let's work backwards from a potential appeal. So what could happen if you got to the worst case scenario and you were actually trying to face something like this? And my goal is for you to never use this, right? So you should never actually have to write an appeal because you've done all the stuff up front where you don't have to. So what we're counting on here is we're counting down the top 10 reasons for Amazon accounts or listings to be suspended for brand sellers. There are lots of other ways to get suspended on Amazon that I'm not going to talk about here. This is the most common specifically for brand sellers. So the goal here is not to scare you, it's to make sure that you know what can come so that you don't ever have to deal with it. Okay, so my background is I spent 8 years at Amazon, more than 7 of them in compliance departments. So I know how Amazon employees are trained, how they process data, and why they make the choices that they make. And that's pretty important because I've heard a lot of stuff from other people in this industry, and I would compare it to medieval medicine. You know how doctors would come up with like It's your humors that are out of balance, and then they'd give you a prescription or whatever, and half the time it would work. Like willow bark tea works just fine for curing headaches, that's great. But they would have the completely wrong reason why it works, and so whenever something new comes along, they had to do the whole trial and error thing again to figure it out. The difference is I actually help build large 100-plus person teams in India, so I know exactly what they're doing. Doesn't help that much with dealing with them, but at least you know the why, and so it's a little bit less frustrating. And I'm here today to help you avoid the mistakes other sellers have made and learn from my experience as a former employee and current consultant. We have helped more than 500 sellers in the last 3 years. Our company birthday was actually 2 days ago, so that was pretty exciting. So it's always nice to know that you've passed a milestone, and as many of you know, y'all running your own businesses, you're like, yay, another year successful. So I like to say that what I do in a lot of ways, especially when I'm speaking, our business is actually, we do a lot of courses in management. So a lot of what we do actually isn't compliance, but my background and what I'm really passionate about and what I really care about is compliance, and it's like the most unsexy thing ever. But if you don't do it, it's pretty catastrophic when something goes wrong. So according to our data, the top reason for account suspensions for brand sellers is multiple inauthentic claims. That's actually true for resellers and for brand sellers. So it's multiple inauthentic claims that haven't been dealt with. So we've seen a lot of people who, they thought that it wasn't that important for whatever reason because it wasn't actually inauthentic. They just got a complaint about it. They figured, okay, I can just not sell it anymore and move on. But then you have stacked up kind of a history with Amazon at that point, and you need to address it. The second most common reason we've seen for account suspension over the past year is review manipulation. This is a really common problem over the past year, and it affects a very broad size range of Amazon sellers too. So a lot of the inauthentic people we see get shut down are mostly smaller sellers. The review guys, I mean, there's some of them that we've worked with where they're selling 500K, $1 million a month, and they're getting shut down by Amazon for review manipulation. So they take it pretty seriously. For ASIN suspensions, the most common reason we see is safety complaints, although that may be a bit self-selecting because as a company we do a lot of safety investigations. So this is one of my favorite pictures to kind of describe what we're trying not to do here. So the more you prepare and the more you organize ahead of time, the less likely you have a situation like this happen in your business. And I've worked with folks who had to recall their entire inventory, worked with people who ended up having to remove 2,000 units from Amazon and put them in new boxes. Just a lot of things that are not fun to do at all. It's much better to plan it ahead of time than to find out that you have to fix this problem when it's already at Amazon and Amazon's paying attention and breathing down your neck. So why am I focused on brands? For one thing, retail and online arbitrage just keeps getting more difficult, more and more restrictive with the different brands that are allowed and not allowed. Brand Registry 2.0 just started last year. And what we're finding is that it's actually fairly easy to get our clients gated on the ASIN level. So while we may not be able to get them brand gated very easily, that actually takes quite a lot of effort and time. And reaching out to the right people at Amazon, getting ASIN gated is actually fairly simple to do. And so for many of our clients, we've actually been able to get to where no resellers can list on their products. So this is becoming easier and easier for brands to do, and it's going to be harder and harder to start out and run a business as a retail or online arbitrage seller. I actually think that wholesale is great. It's a really great place to get into, especially if you can get some sort of exclusive arrangement with a brand. Then you can have all the benefits of running a brand without the cash flow risk. So that's actually like the Shangri-La right there, but those are a little bit hard to find. And then the best growth in terms of the amount of control that you have is starting your own brand. But it's also the highest risk from a risk and liability perspective. If it's your own brand, you're importing it, you're the one who gets sued, and it's also your money tied up for months. So it's the highest return, and it's the thing that you can take off of Amazon and have a business that's not fully Amazon based. It's also the most risky. So making sure that you're forewarned is forearmed is kind of the goal here, because that's really what can help you grow and scale your business past Amazon. So I wanted to give you an example from a client that we worked with who had been doing retail arbitrage, and she had been buying different things. She had set up a wholesale account but wasn't very successful. and launched her own private label brand. She launched with 6 products, and she launched them in about mid-September. And so she had to get reviews. So you can see there's literally no difference between the beginning and middle of September. That wasn't like you launch and then suddenly you're rich. Basically nothing when she first launched. So she had to get the reviews. She had to optimize the listing, started adding more pictures, trying to drive traffic to the product. And over the next month or so, that increase from the beginning of September to what she had through Q4 were the sales of her new private label product. So pretty darn successful. What she had done was use the retail arbitrage process and the wholesale business that she'd gotten to figure out how many views, so how many actual views, page views that her products were getting, what customers were actually saying about the product, what the conversion rates were for specific items, and then she picked only the best ones to private label for herself. So, you know, there's a lot of tools out there that claim that they can give you that information. There's nothing better than doing it yourself. I've tested out a lot of these tools, and most of them are off in some way. Some of them are better than others, but they're all off. None of them are ones that I can just tell you, oh yeah, that's the one that has the secret sauce that can magically see into Amazon's system. No one can see into Amazon's system. They're all guessing. It's just a question of how close their guess is. Are you in the ballpark, or are you like across town? And sometimes you can't tell, right? You have no idea how they wrote their algorithms. So whether you're using a tool like Jungle Scout or Scope, or I think Viral Launch has some of them as well that just spoke, they are all estimating. The best tool, of course, is when you're selling it yourself. So if you can find some wholesale suppliers or do some safe retail arbitrage where you're not going to get an IP infringement claim, this is the best place to start for launching your own items. It's by far the best way to choose a product. There's a lot of ideas out there. There's nothing better than proven page views, proven traffic from customers. The other thing is you don't really need to worry that much about what product you're selling. And I hear people talk a lot about, oh, I just need to find the perfect product. With the perfect product, I'll be rich. These are socks. I don't know if you guys noticed or if you watched Shark Tank. This was on Shark Tank a few seasons ago. They are making millions of dollars. Look at this picture. This is a white sock with blue and red stripes. This is like the most boring sock you could possibly imagine. They're selling 6-packs for like $50. And the reason why they can do that is because they have a social responsibility mission where if you buy a pack of socks from Bombas, they donate 1 pack to a homeless person. You know how much those white socks with the 2 stripes cost in China, FOB? About 95 cents a pair. So it's a good business if you can get into it. So in my opinion, the product isn't nearly as important as all of the stuff you put with it. Your marketing, your mission as a company, and how effective you are at marketing. There's a lot of people who are crap at marketing. So if you can get into that particular space, they've done a really good job of getting themselves out there, telling people about their brand, having people who feel good. I mean, they're not selling socks, right? They're selling righteousness. They're selling feeling good about yourself. And there's 2 things that sell. And it's not about product. It's about fear. Fear sells. And righteousness sells. If you can figure out how to sell those 2 things, then you have a business. Okay, so let's start counting down our top 10. So number 10 way to get suspended on Amazon is not following the style guides. And I know a lot of people here, how many of you are aware of the style guides for the categories that you sell in? Do you know how to find the style guide? This is a problem. So how you find the style guide is you go to help and you type style guide, and then you click through Amazon's stupid help system about 3 clicks to finally get to your style guide page. And there's a style guide per category. So each category has their own requirements. Things that are okay in like shoes or apparel are not okay in other categories. Things that are okay for adult apparel aren't okay for child apparel. So you do need to read the style guide. But regardless, there are a few things that aren't going to be compliant across the board. So how many of you think that the first picture here, the spiral life, I chose spiralizer because garlic press has already been done. And spiralizer is great. There's so many of these dang things on Amazon. So for the first one, how many of you think that this is a compliant image according to the style guide? Okay, so no takers. All right, how many think that the second one is a compliant image according to the style guide? Okay, so we have 1 taker. Yes, okay, 2. How many of you think that the third one is compliant? Okay, yes. So it is the third one that's compliant. I added the second one for a very specific reason, and it is to make sure that everyone in this room knows, and please share this with your friends, the FDA does not approve consumer goods. Ever. If you see FDA approved on a consumer good, they are lying to you. FDA approves new ingredients, they approve medical devices, they approve drugs, and they audit facilities. They don't approve spiralizers. It just blows my mind. So any of those things that you see where you see a citrus squeezer or a spiralizer or a garlic press or a silicone baking mat that has a little FDA logo. First, they're using the IP of the federal government without authorization. That's not cool. Second, Style Guide says that you can't put logos or words onto the images that are on the primary image list. That's not just the first one, that's all of them. You can only put text on images in your enhanced brand content. So people, of course, get away with it all the time. Like, I'm not saying that people don't get away with it, but the Style Guide says no words. The only exception is dimensions. So if you're putting in like size dimensions like inches or feet, then that's okay. And then the first one, of course, is completely wrong because you're not supposed to put the logos of as seen on TV and that sort of thing. And if you actually are wondering, have people actually been suspended for this? Yes. We have had to get people back from suspensions for this. Amazon currently isn't enforcing this in an automated way. It's all based on people reporting each other. So Amazon does have a policy of sellers ratting each other out. That's part of the policy system. So if you get ratted out, then you have a problem. But I have seen some interesting things in shoes over the last 6 months where listings have been suppressed. Shoes and apparel actually have been suppressed because of image algorithm results. So over the last 6 months, I've seen 2 different pushes. The first one was in November last year, where there was a bunch of pushes for text on pictures. So somehow they're scanning pictures for text and then suppressing ASINs in shoes and apparel that had text. And then the second push was about a month ago, where they were suppressing images in shoes and apparel that were considered sexually suggestive or offensive. Their algorithm was bad, but the point is they're trying to do this. They're trying to automate image compliance. So just be aware that this is coming. So the number 9 reason that we see sellers get their listings suspended on Amazon, so this is a listing issue, is when they treat labeling as an afterthought. There's 2 issues with labeling. The first one is that it is a legal requirement. So there is a legal minimum for labeling that a lot of people miss. So you can see in this picture here, you can see that the Appalachian Soap Shop is the brand name, and then Lavender Goat's Milk is the product name, and the net weight 4 ounce is the weight. On the front page, that's all required on your primary facing, the front face of whatever your package is, it's required to be on that. I can't tell you how many people don't do this, or they forget the net weight or quantity. Just is so common to forget the net weight and quantity on the main facing page of a label. And then somewhere on the back or side, you need to put your manufacturer, distributor, importer, whatever the situation may be for you, the full address. You can get away with removing your street address and keeping the city, state, and zip if you put your website. So that's the bare minimum. Those 4 things are the bare minimum in the United States to make product, whether you make it in your garage or you hire someone to make it for you. If you import it, you also need to put the country of origin. There are also specific product requirements. If it's made in the US, you still have to say made in the USA for specific kinds of products that are like FDA regulated and stuff like that. But the bare minimum is those 4 things. The reason why it causes suspensions is because customers will get something that's poorly packaged. You've bought so many things from the store, you know how a package is supposed to look, right? You know it looks like a real package. You get something from Amazon, you look at it, you're like, that's not a real package. It looks like Chinese junk. I'm gonna complain that it's fake. So that's how it happens, is someone bought their own thing from wherever, bought from a factory or trading company or whatever, didn't do the proper labeling, scared a customer, they complained to Amazon that it was fake, and then Amazon, of course, any customer complaint they're gonna review. So they're like, you sold something that's inauthentic, and now you've got to defend the product that you just bought and sold yourself from the factory. And of course, because Amazon doesn't accept factory pro forma invoices or commercial invoices, then you have a bit of a problem trying to get approved based on invoices. So it can turn into this kind of circular loop of misery working with Amazon. So it's better to label properly to begin with. Oh, speaking of the invoice situation, The typical invoices that you get from your supplier, the commercial invoice and the pro forma invoice, are not accepted by Amazon. So make sure you get an invoice from any suppliers you have that just says invoice at the top, and then make sure it has the correct information, your physical address, phone number, and website, their physical address, phone number, and website, and then the product with some sort of identifying information, either a UPC or an FN SKU or an ASIN or the exact title from your listing, but some sort of identifying information, because otherwise the SOP that the Amazon employees are using, typically in Costa Rica or India, says to match what's on the invoice to what is on Amazon, and it needs to say invoice. That's what their SOP says. So if it doesn't say invoice and it doesn't match in some way, like say you have a lot of the Chinese factories will put like 4-pack or something like really basic like that, and that doesn't link to your product in any way. So you want to make sure that that matches. Otherwise, they won't accept your invoice. Okay, so know your numbers. The next most common reason that we see for listings being taken down is from FBA product compliance. FBA product compliance is the team that sends you those emails that say, you have action required, you have a listing shut down due to negative customer experience. And so they're doing that because of numbers, straight numbers. It has nothing to do with whether or not it was a legit takedown or not. It's just because it costs them more to handle more returns. So it's a numbers game for them at FBA. So this is typical returns across the industry. So you can see that returns can be pretty darn high. Amazon actually expects you to be in the 2 to 4% range at most if you're in hard lines, and no more than 8 to 12% if you're in soft lines. And sometimes they'll even take down even if it's in that range. So they want you to be constantly pushing down the returns if you can. So that's tough because like the industry in general, there's more returns than what Amazon expects. But just to keep in mind that you need to stay on top of your returns, and if you start seeing a spike in returns, it's better to deactivate the listing yourself than have Amazon do it. What we see is typically you have 3, maybe 4 chances, and then they shut down the listing from FBA for good. It's done. You can't list again on FBA. I don't think we've ever gotten someone back after an FBA shutdown. No, we did. One person. Took 6 months. Don't do it. Okay, so the key takeaways for the 10th, 9th, and 8th most common reasons for takedown are understanding your style guide. So understand it for your category and follow it, or be aware of what you're doing that's not permitted. So at the very least, make sure you've got your backup files, so in case you get warned, you can replace everything really quick. You don't want to be caught flat-footed and not be able to fix it really quickly. Labeling isn't optional. Meet the mandatory minimum obligation. This will help you seem a lot more legit to your customers. And returns are a reality, but they don't have to tank your business. So always be looking for what can reduce your return rate or what can prevent more returns. Okay, so number 7, forgetting about truth in advertising. No joke, we actually had a listing shutdown that we had to justify and get back from Amazon because customers were complaining that the product was too orange, that in the picture it wasn't as orange. So basic things like trying to just make sure that your product looks like what it actually looks like. There's this kind of delta between the reality of what the product is and what advertisers and marketers, traditional ones, like to do. So you look at this McDonald's Big Mac, right? You know, I'm sure you guys know that like pictures of cereal, that's not milk, it's glue, things like that. So they'll fake certain things to make it look better, or they'll Photoshop like this picture of Aisha Tyler here, where she's looking taller and skinnier and the pants are darker. The biggest problem with this picture, actually, other than the fact that it's perpetuating horrible stereotypes, is that the pants are the wrong color. So if you're a customer on Amazon and you're expecting to get that really dark wash at the bottom of the jeans and you get it and it's actually a lighter wash, then that won't work. You're going to get a return, right? So just because the marketer or your photographer that you hire is used to doing this for an advertisement, you need to be really careful on Amazon. What we've seen is that too slick of presentation on Amazon actually results in lower sales than expected. And a little bit more kind of realistic perspective where people are like, oh yeah, okay, that looks real, that looks like it could fit me, that looks like it would work for me. Something that's just a little bit more easy to relate to, even if it's not super high quality, actually can increase the conversion rate significantly. So I was just doing an example for a client and was like taking pictures of my mom in the bathroom. I'm not joking. Like she was coming to visit me and I was just taking the pictures as an example to the client to explain how their model was too young. their target market was women over 45, and their model was in the 20s. And so it wasn't going to resonate with their target market. And so I just took pictures with my mom, and I was like, okay, Mom, let's turn to the side. All right, now do this. You know, did like these pictures and showed it, and they're like, okay, we'll put it up. Let's see what happens. And their conversion rate increased by 20%. Not like 20% on top of what they already had. I mean like a discrete 20%, from 6% conversion rate to 26% conversion rate of pictures of my mom in the bathroom. So just little things like that where someone can relate to the product rather than thinking that it's something that's fake that's trying to get them drawn in. I think people are just a lot more aware. Even my 6-year-old recently was like, oh, that's just a commercial, that's fake. So it is, you know, something that makes people feel more confident is going to get them to be more positive about it. And then the other thing is that you can get shut down for not as described, right? So if someone feels like it's not a product that they wanted to buy, then that can be not as described. There is also a small regulatory component about this. So I had the Walmart Made in the USA example here. On Walmart.com, someone had listed Made in the USA on the picture, but on the product itself it said Made in China. So that is an FTC compliance violation. You can't do that. For number 6, not inspecting your stuff is a good way to get your listing shut down on Amazon. This particular phrase was my uncle's favorite phrase. He was a fire captain, and preparing for any eventuality is kind of their thing. So what this is an example of an inspection report from Asia Inspection. Asia Inspection, we do recommend them. We typically will recommend any sort of accredited laboratory for your inspections. I do not recommend going with the $100 folks. The fact is, living in Shenzhen, if you're going to try to buy a condo in Shenzhen, it's about $800,000 with the exchange rate. So you can imagine, like, people think, oh, it's China, it's cheap. It's not actually. So when you're only paying some person $100, they're probably going to make up for their lack of income that they're receiving from you or their company in some other way. So it's much more likely for them to be bribed or to extort money from the factory or to take some sort of kickback over time than it is if you just pay someone a proper wage to begin with. So we typically will only work with accredited laboratories that have anti-bribery, anti-corruption policies in place. So inspections are typically about $300. $309 is what Asia Inspection charges. And the most important thing there, what we find people mistake the inspection process for, is they conflate it as everything to do with compliance. So first, the inspection, the pre-shipment inspection that's the picture here, that's one part of a compliance process. So typically, we also recommend that it gets tested in the laboratory, depending on the product type, of course. There's also what's called a DUPRO inspection, a during production inspection, and you can do that at 20% of production to find products before everything's done. A PSI is done at 100% produced. So if something went wrong, or it's the wrong picture, or the wrong logo is screen printed on, or like what just happened for another client a couple months ago, the wrong zipper is sewn in. Basically, everything had to be ripped out and a new zipper sewn in. And that takes extra time. The factory gets ticked off at you. They'll charge you for extra time and effort materials. So it's better to do something up front or to test it up front before the whole production run is done. So PSI is the bare minimum. But to really be on top of your stuff, then I recommend testing the prototype in a lab and doing a during production inspection for the first run. After you get to know your factory and have consistent runs, then you can kind of back off a little bit. Okay, so number 5, choosing a minimalist packaging design. On the left-hand side, you can see it's thin paperboard, and paperboard is typical in retail stores. You can see that it could easily pop open at the bottom. And on the right-hand side, you see an Amazon Basics box. What you can immediately see in terms of the difference is that the Amazon Basics box is much sturdier. It's a much better box. For the most part, most Amazon Basic boxes have at least 2 layers of cardboard between the world and the product. This is because Amazon knows perfectly well how awful their FCs are on packaging. So every single Amazon Basics product that you buy that has any sort of breakability factor at all is going to have at least 2 layers of cardboard, like sometimes as thick as beef loop cardboard between it and everything else. So if you aren't doing that much and you have a breakable product, then you're going to have a problem. So the ones that we see a lot of are these thin retail paperboard, because the factories are like, oh, this is what all the rest of my customers use, so go for it. Well, the problem is those customers are going into retail stores. You don't need to have fancy packaging because an employee puts it on the wall, an employee takes it to the shelf, and then the customer takes it out to their car. Whereas on Amazon, you're going through, miles of conveyor belts, you're going to UPS, and I absolutely swear to you, I was walking my dog and I came back and the UPS driver chucked the box at my porch, threw it. I hope that one wasn't breakable, jeez. So this is the kind of thing that's happening to your boxes. So if you don't have a sturdy box, what happens is things arrive scuffed, damaged, broken, or dirty because something got damaged along the way. And so that's what usually causes the used sold as new complaints. The other cause for used sold as new is returns that go back out to customers, but that's a different issue. That's one that you can't really control for right now. Amazon is running a pilot though. They are running a pilot to where you can have all of your returns returned to you and not go back to FBA, which is awesome. Okay, so key takeaways for these three. Truth in advertising isn't just the right thing to do, it is also legally mandated in consumer protection laws. If you want to read more about it, especially if you're having difficulty sleeping at night, I recommend ftc.gov. It's a great website for replacing sleep medication. Take the time to prepare ahead of time, test in a laboratory, work with accredited inspection companies. Be aware that the value of somebody's time and their experience is significant, and someone who's only paid, because $100 goes to the inspection company, right? So that person who's getting paid is maybe getting like 20 bucks, and they're not getting paid enough. So average for an experienced person in South China right now, if you're paying them, is going to be anywhere from $11 to $15 an hour. That's what you should assume that the employee is getting. And then you have all the overhead for the business. Package appropriately for e-commerce. So Amazon Basics is your best example. So if you have products where Amazon Basics also is, buy one of those, see how they package it, try to do something similar. The number 4 reason we see why our branded sellers get their listings shut down is they are choosing a product with intellectual property restrictions. And they're not generally doing it on purpose. Most of the time it's ignorance. I think that the golden arches there with McDowell's is on purpose. That one's a pretty obvious ripoff. Then that's an example of a trademark violation. So the McDonald's double arches is trademarked. The patent design is the example from Crocs, and they actually won this dispute. And then the 12th man example is a copyright. So 12th man, I believe that they just got an extension on that to be able to use it from like Texas A&M or something like that. So in any case, they wouldn't have been able to call themselves the 12th man if they hadn't got gotten that extended, which would have been kind of sad, I guess. Okay, so the number 3 top issue that we see is choosing a product with a high safety heuristic index and then not doing anything about it. So on the left-hand side, you can see a burning hoverboard. Hoverboards are my favorite whipping boy, along with the other 2, but this one is always first. It was a new product, it was an innovative product, and there wasn't any sort of UL standard for it. And so a bunch of people were importing it with no UL safety listing at all, or the equivalent. And of course, it's a lithium-ion battery, that's problematic, so it started lighting on fire. The middle item is unpasteurized juice. So it hasn't gotten any sort of bacteria killed in it. So if there was bacteria on any of the fruit, it goes right into the unpasteurized juice. So Amazon doesn't really like those. And then the right-hand one is a toy from Cabbage Patch Kids. You may be aware of this. This is the Snack Time doll. And you were supposed to like feed it. Okay, there we are. You're supposed to feed it like veggies or fries or something, but what it was actually doing was catching little girls' hair, and there was no off button. And so it would literally just chomp, 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 rip it out at the roots. Like whole chunks of hair would just come out of this stupid doll. So it got recalled. So things for kids, things that are ingestible or topical, things that are electrical. Those are going to be an issue. So I just have an example of something else that this has an effect on Amazon. There was a product that caused a house fire. It was a Christmas lights, and after that, the CPSC declared decorative lights a substantial product safety hazard, and that category got that subcategory got gated by Amazon within a couple of weeks. So as these things happen, Amazon responds fairly quickly to those. we had a client, I'll call him John. He dropped from 400K a month to 100K a month because of this, because he lost access to his top selling products because the subcategory was gated and had to go test and certify a bunch of products that previously didn't have those requirements. Number 2 is reviews, reviews, reviews. Super helpful Amazon reviews that I totally made up. This is a really common issue. Be really careful with this. I know getting reviews the legit way is really difficult on Amazon right now. It's very, very hard. It can be very tempting to take lots of shortcuts. If you do, be aware that Amazon is finding ways to find you. I don't really have any good advice here, I would say, because there's literally no good way to get reviews on Amazon right now until they extend Vine to sellers. There's no approved way other than the early reviewer program, which is stupid because they have to buy it first before they get asked for it, and they're not going to want to buy it until you have reviews. So the whole thing is stupid. And I think anyone who knows anything about the seller side, they know it's stupid, but until Vine becomes available to sellers, it was on pilot last Q4. So it will be available sometime this year, more than likely. But until then, there's no approved way to get reviews. So be careful, because I'm sure you're finding other ways to do it. And this is a pretty common thing to get caught for. Okay, so key takeaways there. IP infringement is super easy to do. It's also super easy to avoid if you do your research. Safety isn't an option. This is kind of a big passion of mine, partly because I was working in recalls when I was pregnant, and so I got like burned into my brain how awful some of these products are. Basically anything electrical, anything for children, which is defined legally as 13 and under. That means anything you define as junior or like twin size, anything that could be for a person of 13 or under years is going to be considered a child item. Ingestible, topical, or medical devices are going to be considered high risk on Amazon. So be careful if you're in any of those niches. And don't forget that medical devices can be a broad range of items. So toothbrushes are medical devices. So just keep that in mind, that anything that is therapeutic in some way, you could make a claim that could then cause it to become a medical device. So be careful of that. And then don't cheat on reviews unless you're prepared to get shut down. They're getting really good at finding it by using basically algorithmic models. And as they build it and as they improve, I mean, Amazon's got some of the smartest engineers in the world. I mean, I used to work with these guys. They're really smart. They'll figure it out. Okay, number 1 that brings all of these together is AliExpress to Amazon. This is the one that always just is like, what were you thinking? Don't do that. And then I found out after working on this for a while that this is actually a process taught by some people. Like, oh my God. So this particular one is basically an example of all the things that can go wrong. So it's IP infringement. They're also using a license, copyrighted imagery from a show that isn't theirs. You can often tell these new Chinese companies that are coming, they're getting trademarks in the US with like random character strings because they want to get brand registry. And so that one isn't going to be disputed because no one's going to dispute EQMPOWY. It's just not going to happen. So they don't have to worry about anyone disputing them and extending their trademark for 3 months. So if they do this, they can get a trademark within like 5 months from USPTO. So there's a whole bunch of these kind of Chinese businesses that are coming in, and you just have to be really careful. I have seen multiple people buy on AliExpress to test a product. They're importing it. They're importing it under their name. Some of them have used their social security number to import, which means they're personally liable for this product. It's just mind-blowing. And then they'll sell something like a snorkel mask, for example, is one that I heard about recently. And a snorkel mask failed, and someone drowned. Like, these things are not like, they're not toys, right? And if they are toys, you really have to be careful. So I think sometimes people just are so focused on the numbers and, oh, this is a great niche, and they're not thinking at all about the fact that it's a product that people use that they could get hurt by. So this is my biggest thing. Don't engage in China arbitrage. If you're importing something, make sure you're taking that seriously. An importer is legally liable for that product. So when you're doing retail or online arbitrage in the US, the person who brought it into the US or made it in the US is legally liable, not you. So when you buy it from Walmart, the brand owner or Walmart is more likely to get sued than you. So that's totally fine. Like, buy and sell whatever you want as long as it's domestic. If you're bringing it from China and bringing it over and you're the one importing it, you are fully responsible. Be careful. And so this is something where we have seen multiple times. I worked on another project last year with a client where they got a complaint that a baby choked and almost died. They tested it. The item was a choking hazard, and now they had 8,000 products that were potential choking hazards on their hand, and they had to decide whether to go bankrupt or potentially kill a baby. Don't be that person. That's pretty awful. So what we do is we offer the most comprehensive course. I like to say that it's the most comprehensive course because I wrote it, and I like to talk a lot, and I like to share every bit of information that I've got, and I've got a lot. And then we also do a coaching program for writing your own POAs. They can be really expensive to have someone else do, and obviously the goal is for you not to have to spend that money. And if you would like to sign up for any one of those, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee and a 20% off coupon here. And if you have any questions about it, you can write to us at info@thinkcascadia.com. Any questions?
I think we've got time for maybe one question because we're already taking your lunch here. Oh, got one right here. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could elaborate. I was kind of shocked when you said that condo in Shenzhen is at $800,000. And did you say the average wage of a person there is $11 to $15 an hour?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
So how does that jive with, they can produce stuff so inexpensively?
So what they do is they have people who are from the villages come in, and they live in dormitories at the factories. And so they'll live in like 12 to 18 person bunks. And at Amazon, we had a requirement that everyone had to have at least a bunk with a locking locker to hold at least, I think our requirement was 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet was the requirement for personal space with a lock. So, and then they would stay there the whole year, and then they'll leave for Chinese New Year. So you may be aware of the whole Chinese New Year thing and how you can't get anything from China for like 5-6 weeks. That's why. It's because all the people who are coming in from the villages go back home, and often they'll have a 30 to 40% attrition rate in most of those places. So we always say inspect a whole bunch after Chinese New Year because they'll have a whole bunch of new employees there, potentially new welders, new sewers, a whole bunch of new people because they're having to get new village people, new village, whatever, new people coming in to do the work. Yes, I realized that after I said it.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and break for lunch. Everybody, Rachel?